Thank you, thank you. So where are those wonderful net impact students I just had a great discussion with? So I want to not do the whole time talking because there are so many good questions I just was talking about over with the net impact students. So great to be here, love coming here, love what you stand for at the university and the Kroc Alliance that we have here as well. So yeah, I spent 32 years at McDonald's and I lived and learned a lot. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm still adjusting to my post-McDonald's life. I'm in my 6th week. But glad to share with you, kind of what sustainability means to McDonald's, where we've been, where we're going, some of the challenges, and just really very open for all your questions as well. It's a wonderful system to work for, and to work for such a big brand that can really make a difference, and to really think about embedding sustainability into our products like the Big Mac. And one of the big announcements we just made fairly recently with a framework we developed last year, it's kind of my last thing that I did before leaving McDonald's, this 2020 vision with targets and goals. We said we're going to start buying sustainable beef. And we did so not knowing how to get there. And I really commend my company for doing that because, hey, businesses are conservative. McDonald's is pretty conservative. I say that as a compliment. You need to have these kind of conservative viewpoints in business to be successful. But we were willing to take a chance at figuring out how we can make a difference with beef and how we can be influential towards changing the industry to be more sustainable. And I'll talk more about that later on. And really being part of a company for so many years, where my job was to make us be socially responsible, make us be sustainable within a business context. And it's a big responsibility. I took it real seriously because at the end of the day, whatever we do, look at the size and reach. We serve 70 million, customers a day. I think it takes Walmart 3 weeks to do that, right? So this is every day. We're in 120 countries. 1.8 million people work for McDonald's. Probably the thing that most people don't realize about McDonald's that surprises people, because we're so big and our brand is big, is that we're the world's largest small company. Because in reality, that's what we are. But most people don't see that at all because that's not our brand. But the fact is there's about 5,000 different owners of McDonald's around the world. In the United States, it's about 88% of the restaurants are owned by individual business people. About the same ratio around the world as well. So it makes the job of being in charge of sustainability at McDonald's very interesting because you can't just dictate from on high what sustainability is. And a lot of companies sort of can do that. A lot of companies are decentralized. But I always said McDonald's, we're double decentralized. Because not only does each country kind of run their own business, but then you have embedded in this franchise system. I'm out to see if there's any company out there that's more democratic, small d, than McDonald's, because I believe we are. So it's whatever we do at McDonald's, it makes a big difference. And I'll tell you some stories about things that I worked on and colleagues I work with to really make big transformative changes. And that's probably the most rewarding thing of working with a big brand and a big company, is the ripple effect you can kind of have. So I'm mostly going to talk about this framework. At McDonald's, we call it our journey together for good. It's got 5 pillars: food, sourcing, people, community, and planet. This is our framework, for the future that I'll kind of dig into. But first, just a little bit of a perspective on kind of my history. Aaron talked about me being in charge of truck drivers. This is me back in 1990, working with the Environmental Defense Fund. And really, it was this project that was it was my first gig. It was my first thing. I was given a temporary environmental assignment in 1988 to phase out of the chlorofluorocarbons that were in our polystyrene packaging. And then I was also in charge of trying to save the polystyrene package. Now, some of you I see are old enough to know what a polystyrene package is. My net impact students were, I think, 1 year old at that time. But, you know, McDonald's was, believe it or not, for the younger people here, a big symbol of waste in a disposable society. And the emotion that was out there and the attacks on McDonald's in the late 80s, they were tough, they were ruthless, they were visible. We had kids in schools writing letters to our presidents. We had kids all across the world sending in polystyrene packages saying no more polystyrene. It was like the first time ever in McDonald's existence that people didn't like us. I mean, again, you got to go back in history and think, because things were very, very different through the 60s and 70s and 80s. It's like all of a sudden there was an issue that was connecting with society that people weren't pleased with McDonald's. So anyway, I was given this temporary assignment from being in charge of truck drivers to working on environmental issues. And besides finding out, like, wow, this is what I'm meant to do, because that's what happened with me. You know, it's like with me, hey, this is what I was meant to do. I was meant to take on, I always loved learning about different issues. I was a child of the 60s. I always wanted to make things happen and make change in the world. You know, that was in my blood. But when I went to school and I graduated, there was no mechanism to do that I knew of. There wasn't CSR and sustainability and all that type of stuff, you know, back then in the late 70s when I graduated. But when I got this job, I go, man, I can make a difference in the world within the business, which I love. I love business, and I love making a difference. So if anybody likes that, and maybe you're here because of that, get involved, because you can make great things happen. And it is a field now. It is a profession, you know, where people can do that and make a living like I did. I mean, can you imagine, for me, going into work for the last 26 years, thinking I'm in charge of trying to make good things happen within McDonald's system. I mean, there's no greater joy than that, really, and there's no greater satisfaction than seeing the things that you can produce for results, like this. So this is how I always say, hey, I went to the Harvard of learning about sustainability by working with the Environmental Defense Fund. The very first big corporate partnership. Back then in 1990, this wasn't done. So we were criticized for getting in bed with the enemy, for caving in. The Environmental Defense Fund was criticized for how could you work with the bad and evil, you know, McDonald's. But lo and behold, we partnered. We took our work seriously. We reduced tons of waste. By the way, during the decade of the 90s, we reduced 300 million pounds of waste through a whole set of things that I could talk about if you like, because I can get deep into waste, packaging, recycling, and all that. But more than anything, I learned a lesson that applied to everything I've done since then, you know, which is you can come up with practical solutions that are economical for the business on tough societal issues. If you get smart people together, if you work with a partner like the Environmental Defense Fund that really knows their stuff, you work with a company that wants to do something, you work with your suppliers that are part of making it happen, you base your work on science, which is not always easy to do because there's a lot of emotion in a lot of these issues, and you allow yourself enough time. So believe it or not, you know, we went from being evil and being in the outhouse, you know, we ended up getting White House awards. And we became an environmental hero back in the early 1990s because of all this effort. I go, man, this is win-win. We did all of this just because we took it on. By the way, we didn't spend one extra penny on any of these moves. We became a leader. It was just like perfect. Our customers are happier. And I always thought, let's recreate this work time and time again. And since 1990, I think we've worked on probably 30 partnerships. And I'll give you a couple other examples along the way that follow this model. By the way, I'm going to allow time for Q&A at the end, at least 15, 20 minutes, so save your questions. But if you have a question along the way, please do so. This is another story that I want to tell just about what you can make happen in a company. So far, I've asked 5 people on the campus who Dr. Temple Grandin is, and nobody knows her yet. So in this audience, who's heard of Dr. Temple Grandin? All right, a few more. And because she is quite famous in her field. Did you see the movie about her?
She was just here.
She was? Did you see her?
Yeah, I couldn't get in.
Anybody see her? when she was here? No. Well, it's great that you had her. Sorry that you missed her. I think she's the most fascinating person I ever worked with. She's my hero. You know, if I ever get down in the dumps about whatever's happening, she is the most passionate person I've ever seen about what she does. Not sure if it's fueled by autism, whatever, because for whatever reason, you know, nothing affects her. Emotionally, you know, she's a different person because of her autism, but it fuels her towards just being so practical. She never gives up. And we work with her because she's also the leading scientist in animal welfare. And she had a way to design an audit system with our suppliers to measure proper animal welfare treatment. So I was given a job in 1997 to devise an animal welfare program for McDonald's. So since I knew nothing about animals, I mean nothing. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I just saw dogs, that's all I saw. I didn't see farm animals. So I figured out, I learned that she's the best expert. So we went to visit her, and I go, man, this is gonna work. So we worked with our suppliers, and with McDonald's, our supplier relationships gives us an upper hand on making things happen. Now, most businesses don't have a supply chain structure like McDonald's. I think it's one of our strengths. We're very long-term with our suppliers. We're not transactional. So when we buy things, a lot of our competitors are day-to-day and they price shop. We pick suppliers out for the long term. We have handshake agreements. Still to this day, most of our business is handshake, trust. That's kind of the foundation of what McDonald's is all about. That's our culture, is one of relationships, trust, and openness. So when we go to our suppliers and say, hey, let's agree mutually that we need to get an animal welfare program, our suppliers don't push back. If they see it makes sense, which it does, they say, okay, yeah, let's figure it out. So I put Temple Grandin with our suppliers, and I said, hey, make this happen. And it happened. And I can tell you that the way animals are treated today is far, far superior to the way that they were treated, you know, back pre-1997. And by the way, when I talk about working on transformative change, not only for McDonald's, and not only in the US, but all around the world, and all these systems have migrated because of when we make a change, in general, everybody does the same thing. So basically, everybody has a system now. All people that buy meat, the whole system's improved. So I was trying to figure out, how can I give you an example of something that's improved in animal welfare without wrecking your lunch? So, I mean, the example I'll give is, so when I went into my first facility back in 1997, not knowing what I'm gonna see, I saw that the handling of the cattle was all done by these electrical prods. So all the workers there would have a short stick, and almost all the animals, they would just zap them with an electrical shock to move them along. And so I would ask, wait, does that hurt them? They go, oh, no, it doesn't hurt them. You know, but then the animals were all kind of moving around like they're getting zapped. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right to me. And Dr. Temple Grandin, she hated it. And she thought there were solutions for it. And we helped implement those solutions. So you could design the way handling is done so the animals kind of self-move themselves. You don't have to zap an animal. You could use a flag to help, knowing where you stand and all that. So if you were to go into facilities today, it's almost like a quiet oasis. The animals are treated well. It's tremendously quiet. There's none of this zapping going around and other things, so that I can talk about later on if you want to ask about. Here's another story I want to tell. This report called Eating Up the Amazon came out in 2006. As a matter of fact, it was tax day of 2006. I woke up with my BlackBerry at the time and going, oh, wow, we have a campaign against us on an issue I knew nothing about, which is really interesting. Here we are, I'm in charge of trying to keep track of all these issues. So we're getting campaigned in the UK. People, I thought I had this picture. People dressed up in these chicken suits, and they went to about 70 restaurants in the UK to get attention. Because, you know, Greenpeace is good at, they don't have a big marketing budget, but they know how to get attention. And now you're saying to yourselves, why in Europe? Soya is grown in Brazil. A lot of it is exported to markets like Europe that use it for chicken feed. That ends up going into chicken McNuggets. So what I did, as soon as I heard about it, was like, I had to learn from scratch. So I talked to a couple environmental groups that I trust, like World Wildlife Fund and Conservation International. I said, is this report that they did, is it true? And basically I learned within a matter of hours that the gist of what Greenpeace was saying was true. Which, in business, it's very tough for businesses to acknowledge that when an activist group is true. I always like to argue within the company, saying, hey, let's not think that everything that an activist throws at us is wrong, just because their tactics, I don't like their tactics either. On the other hand, many of their messages have an element of truth to them. So this one did. So I rallied within the company that same day and got management to agree that, to do something about it. That's part of my job as a leader in McDonald's, is to get a decision made. So I called up Greenpeace that very afternoon. And I said, hey, I learned later that I shocked the smithereens out of them. Because, by the way, I ended up taking a 9-day trip through the Amazon with 4 of us through McDonald's and 4 of us through Greenpeace, and it was one of the best experiences I ever had. So I got to know these people very well, got to like them very well, like what they're doing. But I called them up and said, hey, we agree with you. And they're like, what? Yeah, we agree with you. But they also gave us a list of 15 demands, demanding that we do these 15 things done by next Monday. I said, these demands that you're putting on us, they are ridiculous. And they're not going to solve the problem at hand. Now, you have to have confidence to say that, right? To say that, because I had a lot of confidence that this problem was not going to be solved by us doing something about it, by the way. By the way, McDonald's and our suppliers bought 1/10 of 1% of the soy. So again, not to say that that we're not part of the problem, because we were, but we were symbolic. So at the end of the day, I said, wait, we agree with you, but it's not going to happen by just you attacking McDonald's. But if you work with us, we get other retailers at the table. We can work with our suppliers like Cargill, who's one of the big 5 traders in Brazil. I bet you we can make a difference. So lo and behold, in a matter of 3 months, this is record time. I mean, this is a tough issue. Within 3 months, an announcement was made with all the traders in Brazil, the industry, along with Greenpeace and retailers, that there would be a moratorium on any further soya farming that would infringe upon the Amazon rainforest. And that was done in July of 2006. It's been renewed every year since. There's been GPS tracking systems that have proved that virtually there's been no more soya farming done in ways that affect the Amazon rainforest. And I'm very, very proud of that work. Again, realizing that through the force of a company like McDonald's and our leverage and our reach and our supplier relationships that we have, that we could help preserve the Amazon. It just shows you the kind of the power that we have. Has anybody gone to the Amazon? Pretty cool place, huh? Did you go to the places that are still wonderful, or did you go to the places that are being deformed?
And then did a 5-day riverboat tour. So we went touring through the jungle and everything. So we went to the places that are still quote unquote untouched.
I don't know why more Americans don't go to the Amazon. Of course, one of the reasons is it's huge. It's bigger than Western Europe, I do believe. So it's a huge place, but if you ever get down there. By the way, 80% of the Amazon is still pristine Amazon rainforest, of which I saw plenty of that. And to think that I took an airplane ride with Greenpeace in their little plane. We traveled for 3 hours west from Manaus. And once you get outside Manaus, just even after 10 or 15 minutes, I went 2.5 hours by plane. I didn't see one person below. I didn't see one structure, one building, one set of wires. I saw nothing. If you want to go to some place that is still the way it is, in its natural way, go to the Amazon. So yeah, 20% has been destroyed or deforested. And right now the law says that that's the ratio that they want. They want an 80%, 20% ratio because they want to have economic development. Anyway, enjoyed that trip. I enjoyed the results that I still talked about. Well, our work over the years at McDonald's was done through probably our values. And thank goodness we had a CEO that came in about 4 years ago and said, you know what, I like the work we're doing on corporate responsibility that I've been leading for a couple of decades. But he came to me and one other person, the person that heads it up now, Francesca DiBiase, and said, hey, I want our company to have a strategic stand on sustainability. It's the right thing to do, but what we're doing, it's a little bit disjointed. We're doing a lot of things, and nobody knows about what we're doing, even within the company or outside the company. So I think we've done a lot of great work, over the years, through good people, good works, and good values. But he wanted a strategy that could help grow our business and be responsible. That's aligned, that's really focused on a few things and make a difference and get more credit. So this slide here is really important in terms of what we did, because this was kind of the main slide to show to our senior management and to the board of directors to say why we were changing from one way of doing it to another. And we produced this framework, which obviously is a little bit too detailed to have you see, but I want you to understand that this is a big, big piece of work. It took 3 years to get done, to get all the internal alignment, because in this one page is everything that we stand for. And we released this last May, so about a year ago. It's what we stand for. It set goals and targets. It set aspirations. And most importantly, our senior management was totally involved with this. Sustainability is part of, I was never invited to all the senior management meetings in all my career until maybe starting 4 years ago, because it became that type of top-level strategic issue for the company. And I think we're symbolic of so many companies where this is important. I'll go through some of these things a little bit more in detail. Probably the most important thing from this slide, because you probably can read the headline, which I think is the most important thing, which is it's growing our business by making a positive difference in society. Now, maybe that sounds a little bit like ho-hum, but in our business, I'm telling you, this was a new way of thinking. Because our way of thinking in many businesses, they looked at these good things to do a little bit more just as something good to do, not thinking through the lens of growing the business. So I was just insistent for this thing to be workable and sustainable. Business leaders want to see that this is good for business. So whatever we put on this during that 3-year work of alignment, if you got resistance and somebody would say, well, I don't want to do that because I don't see that being good for business, I would say, okay, we don't want to put anything on this framework that isn't going to help our business grow.
I'm not familiar with the mission statement of McDonald's. Is there a way that you could sort of summarize that real quick?
For the company. Are you talking about the company or for sustainability?
The corporation. Just you said we don't want to do anything that's not good for the business. Huh?
I think the mission of the company is to be customers' favorite way and place to eat and drink. More of a functional mission, I guess, is probably one way to answer it. And plus, from a brand viewpoint, we want to have simple, easy enjoyment. Now, none of those things probably, and I can just guess by your reaction, they don't move you, do they? I'm not sure that they do. And I think that's part of why we want to work on sustainability is, McDonald's, we always felt, and I always felt, we do all this good in the world, but nobody seems to know or care that we care. We care. We have a lot of great people that work for McDonald's. I love what we did. I always wish more people knew. And I think bringing out this dimension of McDonald's is really important. And that's what we're trying to do. And you're going to see in our marketing practices more money spent on this. This is the key strategic way of thinking. And this helped a lot with me making this happen within the company. The shared value model. By the way, Michael Porter from Harvard's got the greatest piece in the world to read on this thing that I highly recommend for further detail. He's brilliant. So this shared value model is a whole different way of thinking about corporate responsibility, because so much of corporate responsibility historically comes from philanthropic viewpoints and kind of doing good. And I'm not arguing that doing good is bad. Doing good is wonderful. But doing good has its ups and downs. Doing good is not necessarily part of a company strategy, right, that's going to move things forward. So I think it's a much higher level to have something be a strategy for the company. So, and that's the idea here, is only work on things that bring both social value, good, and business value. And that really helps the company hone in then on what's, so when I talk about beef, beef is the perfect example. And that's why we're working on it. We went through the screen and said, okay, and we worked with stakeholders. We invited a whole bunch of people in and said, hey, where is our biggest impact on society? Beef. Universally, that's what people kept telling us. We can make a big difference with beef. Okay, what's the business value of making beef more sustainable? I think we sell a lot of beef, right? We're known for selling beef. I promised some people here, and you can answer it, right? How much sales of beef come from McDonald's? What do you think? What's our market share for buying beef in the world? Do you have a guess?
No.
Give me a guess, though.
60%?
60%? How about this table over here? 40? Anybody want to say a little bit less than 2%? That's what we buy. By the way, don't feel bad and don't feel dumb, because I had a whole big room of lawyers from McDonald's in the room, well-trained, right? Asked the same question, same answer, 40, 60%. Yeah, we're about 1.5 to 2% of the marketplace for buying beef. I think that shocks some people sometimes. I'm not saying it to disown the issue, exactly the reverse. It's putting a piece of practicality around when even a company like McDonald's wants to change beef. We have to realize that we can't snap our fingers and have everything change along the supply chain. You still can change. We have a lot of power, but you have to use powers of convening and influence and brand and all that type of stuff to make it happen, believe me. And I could lecture a whole day on how to make things like that happen. But what's the business value of sustainable beef? McDonald's has 5 burger brands that sell $1 billion each. Our brand is identified with beef. Beef has big issues, doesn't it? By the way, roughly 35% of our carbon footprint for our business is simply through beef. Imagine that. Imagine that we have 34,000 restaurants that use a lot of electricity. And that carbon footprint of all that energy used equals what beef is. And by the way, I'm not trashing beef. It's just a reality that beef has impacts. And so I'm out there talking to a lot of beef ranchers over last year, ever since we made it. And these beef ranchers, they got some questions about what we're asking them to do. And they don't like to be told what to do either. Like McDonald's, we don't like people telling us what to do. We run our business, the beef ranchers run their business. But we have a common interest here. We want to sell more beef. We really do. And we want to make beef more relevant to today's consumer who cares. This is the biggest trend that I've seen in the food business. People care where their food comes from, what's in it, how it's made, what are the values along the way. And beef is losing some of its resonance. So we believe sustainable beef is something that's needed, another dimension to make it relevant. So that's the business value there. I don't think I have time for no, I'm going to skip the video. I was going to show a video, so we'll move on. Probably the biggest challenge I had was getting goals and targets established at McDonald's. This is one of the slides I showed internally to try to convince management. At first, there was a lot of resistance towards setting specific goals for 2020. So I showed this slide to say, well, we're kind of an outlier. Almost all these other companies have sustainability goals. We're becoming one of the few companies in the world that doesn't have them. And that worked a little bit. But the fact is, McDonald's got burnt back, well, how long ago was it? 10 or 15 years ago. Do you remember when we set a goal that we're going to get rid of the trans fatty acids from our cooking oil? We said we'd get rid of them within 3 years. And it took us like 5 years to do it. And believe it or not, we got sued. Believe it or not, we had a legal settlement that we had to pay out in multi-million dollars for not reaching a goal that was well-intended. We actually did meet the goal, but late, yet we had to pay out money. It was like very, very frustrating for our company. I was very frustrated that that would happen. So that's always tarnished our company culture. Like they would say, well, why are we going to set more goals when people could sue us if we don't achieve them? So it took more work for me to kind of go through it. So I went through some more companies that have goals, and I used this. I'll go through this quickly. I went through this whole set of exercises to show what other companies are doing. And this is not meant to go through the examples, but both examples within the food and beverage industry of what other people were doing, plus how companies, I try to explain how companies like Starbucks, it's very public what they're doing. You can set goals and not achieve them and not get in trouble. Because the secret here is to be transparent about what you're trying to do. For Starbucks, who I think is a wonderful company, they have really good sustainability programs. I do believe they originally set a goal of 15%. And they were finding that their customers, they couldn't do it. So they reported that they couldn't do it, and so they made the goal lesser. If you read about Chipotle this past summer, they got kudos because they were running out of sustainable pork in their restaurants. So rather than customers complaining, they actually got kudos for the fact that they were being transparent about it, because it's one of their core values is to sell sustainable pork. So you can do this, set goals, you can fall short as long as you are trying, you're transparent, you talk about your progress, you talk about your shortcomings. Companies were setting goals like we did with beef. I mean, this is how we learn from it. Things that are core to their business, like Coke working on water. That makes sense, right? Yeah, most of their product is water. McDonald's working on beef. That makes sense. I mean, Walmart's made a huge difference. Ever since Walmart entered the game in 2006, whatever your views on Walmart are, the fact is they've made a phenomenal difference on sustainability by driving it through their supply chain. Unilever is probably the #1 company I would put out there for being a sustainability leader. If you want to see who's doing the best job at doing things, Paul Pullman, their CEO, is probably the #1 leader in this area by far. What I really like about what they're doing at Unilever is they got 330 brands within the Unilever umbrella. Paul Pullman's got every one of those brands saying that they have to find a purpose behind every brand and get that purpose to be part of how they appeal to consumers. I really like that idea. And that's an idea, because I think the sustainability language is tough. Like within McDonald's, I wish we would change the language, because people kind of blank out when you talk about sustainability. The language isn't too understandable. But to me, it's more like serving a purpose. There's a purpose beyond profit. And the things that we're working on, whether it's the Unilevers, the Walmarts, the Starbucks, the McDonald's, it's to make things more purposeful, that there's more in our business beyond making a profit. Unilever, fantastic company. So I think this was the chart that really made things happen for good on my work at McDonald's. Because I basically, as management, was getting this axis, call this no risk. So goal certainty up here, this means no risk. And to be a leader is out here. And my basic message to management was they were kind of wanting no risk. So I said, well, you can't have your cake and eat it too. To be a leader in sustainability, if you want no risk, you know what that's going to be for sustainability leadership? It means we're going to be right here. So I basically asked our management team, where do you want to be? I just put it right in their lap. Because they were asking us to be a leader. Part of our mandate was to be a leader. So as we created things back to them that were leadership, I got reaction was, well, it's too risky. So then I created this chart and said, well, tell me where you want to be then. And it really broke through. It was really very helpful because nobody wanted to be here. They want to be a leader. But then you do have to plot yourself, and we plotted ourselves on this curve. With certain things, we want to take more risks than others. You have to take risks. You have to take some smart, business risk. So, we've set some different goals, and I'll try to run through them quickly. Sourcing is a big one. I've talked about beef. We're doing coffee, palm oil, and fish, and all of our fiber. So all these 5 product items, we're working on getting them verifiable, sustainable by 2020. With beef, we haven't set a number yet. We'll set a number in 2016. That's when we're going to start buying sustainable beef. With the others, we want all of our coffee, fish, palm oil, and fiber to come from verifiable, sustainable sources. And by the way, I think McDonald's in the food business sells the most sustainable products even today. Now, maybe you don't believe me. Maybe a few raised eyebrows. But the fact is, we are already selling sustainable food, and you probably don't know it. So, and I can't wait for the marketing teams to get more consumers to be aware of it. So right now, we sell sustainable fish. So all of our fish is Marine Stewardship Council certified. I don't know anybody that's matching us for selling sustainable fish. And by the way, it's all around the world. In the United States, we put it right as a consumer claim. Same thing with all of our espresso-based coffee. It's all Rainforest Alliance certified, all the espresso-based coffee, and we're working on the rest of the coffee along the way. But that's about a quarter of our coffee that is sustainable. So you can see we're starting to be there. We're starting to go there, and there's more to come. And we're hoping to, the business benefit is, if I asked how many of you go to McDonald's on a regular basis, maybe I'll ask you that, but I presume, I'm just guessing, maybe not so much visits here in this room. We want people like you to come to our restaurants. And we think work like this will have you come. And much of our work, the average McDonald's customer comes to McDonald's 2.5 times a month. So even with our current customers, we believe work like this, instead of coming 2.5 times a month, why not come 3 times a month, 3.5 times a month? Do you think anybody here in this room might be motivated to go to McDonald's after my talk? I don't know. Yes, thank you for nodding your head. Oh, I've already talked enough about beef and the sustainable beef journey. If you want to read a great story on beef, go to greenbiz.com, greenbiz, and look up McDonald's and beef. I think it's the most wonderful, thorough study of a tough issue. And you'll learn all about beef and how to make it sustainable and the journey we're on. It's so good. So many things in sustainability and what you read in the papers, they get just a short shrift, and you don't really get the seriousness of it, because working on all these issues is really hard. I've already talked about the beef impact. I've talked about this already. I talked about leveraging how we just can't snap our fingers and make things happen. So a lot of our work is done through collaboration. We were the instigator to create a global roundtable for sustainable beef. We instigated this. We actually were the ones to say, let's get this together. We worked with the World Wildlife Fund and said, we didn't do this under pressure. We did this under the idea we want to grow our business. Look at all the people and organizations we've recruited to stand up and say we want sustainable beef. I'm very proud of this. Why do we need to work with NGOs? Even to this day, I run into a lot of companies and suppliers that think all NGOs are like bad. They're evil. And I just get a laugh, because almost all NGOs are well-meaning. I mean, they're well-meaning. They have a lot of passion. Most of them are really, really good people. Some of them are out to do no good and to try to be very negative, but most of them are really, really just wonderful people. Some of my best friends. Besides using them for expertise, the reality is businesses need to work with NGOs for credibility. I mean, just take a look at this chart for trust. First of all, people don't trust companies to begin with. Who do they trust? And you can see in this curve, yeah, scientists and NGOs. And look at global companies. It's actually negative. I mean, is there a more global company than McDonald's? So we're dealing with a landscape where the setup is not to trust the McDonald's to begin with. And then you take everything else put in there, you got to work on ways to gain trust. Are people going to believe that we were a leader in animal welfare, that story I told, unless Dr. Temple Grandin were to say that without McDonald's doing what they did, all these changes wouldn't have happened? She said that publicly. I think people are going to believe her. But by the way, it's the truth. But if I said it, I don't know if you believe me. But she says it, it's the truth. We're working with beef and the World Wildlife Fund. So when they say McDonald's is really making a difference with beef, I think you'll believe it. But if I were to say it, I'm not sure you would believe me. Working on palm oil. That's an interesting issue, although most of the impact is in Asia. I had a question earlier on about who's more impactful, governments or companies? And I said, well, by default, companies are more impactful on sustainability because governments aren't really doing anything, really anywhere. It's not just the United States. Like in Indonesia, where most palm oil comes from Malaysia and Indonesia, the Indonesian government doesn't do a great job enforcing their standards. And so what do companies have to do? Companies have to go in and develop their own standards for something that probably is a governmental role. But hey, you just can't sit around. So companies have to leap into action like we are. I've already talked about fish, coffee. Oh, got some duplicate slides. Oh, I would say this is the issue here that probably I lose the most sleep on. This idea of the right thing to do. When I say the right thing to do, let's say that's the science of an issue, versus perhaps what common people might think, what's politically correct. So, because all these issues are quite complicated. To say that there should be no antibiotics in meat sounds good. On the other hand, when animals get sick, what are you supposed to do? They should get treated with antibiotics, shouldn't they? You want to save the animal. So these things are tough. I want to give you a couple examples. One with, I spent a lot of time with eggs and how eggs are done and what's the best way for eggs. And I will ask you a question. Which of these, there's 3 systems out there. By the way, most of Americans' eggs come from conventional cages, maybe 4 birds to a cage. Some come from cage-free. Maybe some of you buy cage-free eggs. It's called aviary, kind of an open barn. They're in a barn and they lay their eggs along the way. And then there's these kind of condo cages, bigger cages with perches and scratching pads and stuff like that. There's a big study being done. And by the way, McDonald's made a big move back in 2001 that I was involved with by asking our suppliers to double the size of the cages. Big move, big PR. Got a lot of resistance from our suppliers who didn't want to do it. So that's another thing. It's like, okay, our suppliers actually didn't want to do it. We had 28 local egg suppliers. And believe it or not, none of them wanted to do it. So we said, okay, you're not going to do it. We set up our own supply chain system through a dedicated supplier. They lost the business. I just can't believe they did it. And then the reality is, because they didn't want to change. The reality is the whole industry changed once we did it. And now it's changing even more because the world's moved on. So there's a big study through the Coalition of a Sustainable Egg Supply, that first slide, that's completing a scientific work. There's a lot of pros and cons about what is the most sustainable. Again, remember, sustainability is holistic. It's not just animal welfare. Like, that's one of the tough jobs about like McDonald's, like the buck stops at McDonald's. Because at the end of the day, sustainability means it's good for animals, it's good for the environment, it's good for people because it's clean, sanitary, safe, it's economical. You got all these issues. And it's very, very hard to have every one of them be measured at 100%. I hate to say it, but there's trade-offs. You know, if you have the most perfect animal welfare system, maybe it's not the best for the environment because you're using more land. You know, maybe it's more expensive. Maybe one system has more animal mortality rates. So which one do you think is the most sustainable from a scientific viewpoint?
I'd say on what level? Animal welfare or not?
You're smart, because there is no right answer to my question. So it's a rhetorical question. It depends on what your value is. But I'll tell you what, after I've looked at it all, and it's not easy, you know, I think this bigger cage system is probably the most sustainable. Again, it's more of an art versus a science. But believe it or not, most Americans think that cage-free is the way to go. But I'll tell you that cage-free is not probably what you think it should be. First of all, even from an animal welfare viewpoint, it has the highest mortality rates for the birds for various reasons. And if I were to bring you through a cage-free facility, I would bet you might change your mind that you'd rather have it come from more of a cage system. Because the advantages of this is it's cleaner. The ammonia levels are much lower. It can be more sanitary. So I'm not saying you can't make all the eggs clean in these open systems, but just it's a bigger challenge. So I'm trying to tell you it's a little bit complex out there. Very hard to describe to consumers. Here's another example, one that I think this will be my last one, and then we'll open it up for questions. The GMO potatoes. I have a feeling in this room, you know, perhaps not good feelings about genetically modified foods. And I'm not here to try to defend it or be an advocate for it. But I can tell you that the GMO potato that one of McDonald's suppliers that just got developed and just got approved in a matter of the last couple months, the science on it will tell you that it would be better for the world. It really would. I have no doubt about it. I'm 100% sure of that. And by the way, the GMO origins of that potato is simply taking the DNA from another potato and splicing it into a different potato. Now, there are some GMOs where you take some sort of butterfly DNA and you put it into a salmon. I don't know all that stuff, but this wasn't as crazy as that. So I don't know. I lose sleep over the fact that where does science fit in? Where does popular opinion fit in? It's a real struggle sometimes. I can just tell you that. I'm not sure if there's any other slides. Oh, we could talk about food, and I'm very, very passionate about food and nutrition, and I've worked on that for the company. The environment, we didn't get a chance to talk about some of our goals. Our goal is to reduce 20% of our energy impact. We want to recycle half of our waste. On the food part, we want to double fruits and vegetables sales by 2020. So we can talk about that if you like. Our charity, Ronald McDonald's charity, we think it's one of the greatest charities around. We could talk about opportunities at McDonald's. I think that's the opportunities part of the story gets short shrift today with all the campaigns against McDonald's on the minimum wage issue, which is a real issue to contend with. I really like to more talk about the fact that you can go to McDonald's. It's a rare place that you can go to with very little talent and no skills. And that is our business model. I mean, we have entry-level workers. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And that's one of the reasons I like working there. It's just amazing the different types of people you have at McDonald's, because these are the people that can rise up in the organization and run our company, which so many do. So, I'm not an expert at all the wage issues, but I can tell you that McDonald's is a great place to have a career and make a good living that many people do from starting out in the restaurants. All right. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you and share some stuff, and thank you. Thank you for your questions.